Welcome to the worship services of the First Missionary Baptist Church in Huntsville. We're striving to become one of the most loving churches in all the world. Please join us now for a portion of our worship service.
Whenever a nation suffers, care what time it is, whether it's back in Judah when they carried the Judeans off to Babylon, or another time in history, or right now, whenever a nation suffers, everybody suffers. All of us feel a pinch of the punishment. And so Elijah is told Ahab and Queen Jezebel, not going to be any rain, not going to be any dew. 3 years, it's going to be drought, famine, starvation. But watch God. God says to Elijah, Elijah, in spite of the drought season, in spite of the impending famine and starvation, I'm going to take care of you, prophet. And I'm going to provide for you. So he said to him, here's what I want to do. I want to give you another directive. You've already gone up to Ahab. You've already told him what I said, tell him. You've already spoken truth to power. Now I want you to go eastward and hide by the brook Kerith that flows into Jordan. Because I'm going to hide you from Jezebel. Man, she's going to kill you. You remember Reverend Knott's preach last Sunday? Later on, Elijah got scared and ran into the desert, into the cave, hide behind the juniper tree and all that. Elijah knew that Jezebel was mad with him because he had spoken truth to power. And God said, I'm going to hide you at the brook Kerith that flows in the Jordan. Go over there and stay. And not only am I going to protect you as I hide you at the brook and keep Jezebel from you, but I'm going to feed you while you're over there. I've already told the black-winged ravens from the backside of Mount Gilead to form a terrestrial catering service and bring your breakfast in the morning and your dinner in the evening. I'm going to provide for you. I'm going to take care of it. In a period of drought, famine, and starvation, I'm going to let the water run for you, and I'm going to make birds cater your food. I'm going to take care of you. That gives me hope. In a Trump era, or any other kind of era, that God does not want us to be in, but we bring ourselves in. Gives me hope because, you see, it says to me, no matter what's happening out there, they can't control who's up there. No matter who's in the presidency, no matter who's in the Senate, no matter who's in the legislature, the legislative branch, you see, no matter who's in the governor's office, no matter who's in the mayor's office, no matter who's in power, they can't control the power that's up there. Because our God can trump the Trump. He's able to handle any situation and to take care of us in the midst of the situation. Elijah, I'm going to let the birds feed you. And I'm going to cause the brook to run to give you water. God is able to take care of us in any era. And he's going to take care of us in the Trump era. I don't know what kind of president Trump is going to be. I'm not trying to be a predictor. But based upon all the rhetoric that we've heard from him, we know from that rhetoric he sure isn't in love with us. And he's not in love with other minorities. So it probably means that he's not going to do as much as he ought to do and as a president ought to do. But even if he doesn't, he can't stop God. Because God has brooks and birds that Mr. Trump does not control. Brooks and birds in this text represent God's way of working from behind the scene to bring blessings on the scene that the man in power cannot do anything about. Nobody can block your blessings when they're coming from God. If God has to come through the back door in order to get your blessings in, he knows where the back door is. If God has to open the window to pour them through the window, he knows where the window is. If God has to open up a hole in the roof to get your blessing down, he knows how to cut holes in roofs in order to get your blessings in. Nobody can block your blessings when God wants to bless you. Not even Mr. Trump. And I've got some witnesses. Elijah is the first witness. I'm here at the brook. Jezebel doesn't like me. Ahab hates me. But I'm at the brook drinking water because God's making the brook run. I'm at the brook. Birds catering my breakfast and my dinner, and they can't stop it. I have another witness. I feel him touching me right now. He said, Julius, let me talk a minute. Just 1 minute, a little half minute. He said, Julius, tell him I said that God will prepare a table for you in the presence of your enemy. They want you to starve to death. They want you to faint and fall out. They want you to lose your mind. They want you to go crazy. But God will prepare a table for you right in their presence and let you eat and make them look at you eat, and they can't stop you. I feel another witness touching me on my other shoulder and said, Julius, I've got one line I want to give you to share with the people this morning because I'm an old man. I once was young, but now I'm old. And I've never seen the righteous forsaken, nor their seed begging bread. And while that man was talking to me, the hymnist walked up and said, Julius, we need a song in here. Because for every good sermon, there ought to be a good song to back up that sermon. And the hymnist said, tell him, Julius, great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. Oh, that I've needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Elijah said we ought to follow God's directives, obey them. In the second place, he says to us that in these difficult days and in these tough times, we're going to face some swift transitions. Now, the swift transition in this text is that Elijah went down to the brook, perhaps to get some water, as he had been used to doing. And when he got there that morning, the brook was dry. No water. And you know what? The text implies that not only did the brook dry up, but the birds didn't come. They didn't cater his breakfast nor his dinner on that day. Now, he could have been really stunned, as I was when I woke up that morning and ran across television. Mr. Trump is the new president-elect. I was stunned. I mean, that was a swift transition. Because when I went to bed they were still wrestling about Wisconsin and Michigan, whether they were going to pull us through or not. But when I woke up, they went over the other way. I was stunned. I was shocked. Elijah could have been stunned, could have been shocked with this swift transition. But here's how you handle swift transitions. You remember this, that no matter how gradual or how swift the transition may be, God is God before the transition. He's God in the transition, and he's God after the transition. He knows how to master transitions. And if you walk with him, he'll walk with you through transitions. It's in the text. When this transition came, the brook dried up. God didn't dry up. The brook dried up. Too many of us get all excited and bent out of shape. Mr. Trump is the new president. Oh, Mr. Trump is the new president. What we gonna do? What we gonna do? God is still president. And I told you a minute ago, he knows how to trump the Trump. He knows how to handle the transitions. Well, let me raise this question with you as I move on. I'm going to take too long, but I'm going to still take it. Why does God allow our brooks to dry up? I've sort of indicated earlier, but I want to give you another perspective here. Why does God allow our brooks to dry up? Sometimes he allows our brooks to dry up because he wants to open up a river. When Elijah's brook dried up, guess what the next line says? And the word of the Lord came unto Elijah and said, arise and go to Zarephath. I've got a widow over there who's going to provide for you. Your brook is dried up. Your bird's not catering your breakfast and your dinner, but I haven't forgotten about you. I got provisions in another place. Just get up and go where I tell you to go. The Bible says Elijah got up, left that dried up brook. Don't hang around dried up brooks. You starve to death. Don't get nostalgic about dried up brooks. God says, get up, move, get up, move. Elijah got up and moved and left that dried brook. Went on to Zarephath. Came to Zarephath, and when he came into the city of Zarephath, God had already told him a widow was going to be there to provide for him. Isn't that in the scripture? You all read that? Just as he's coming into the city, he looks and he sees this lady. She's out there in the yard gathering some sticks. And Elijah walks up to her and he says, ma'am, would you bring me a cup of water that I may drink? Now watch this. When he asked the lady for a cup of water, the lady didn't question him at all. She turned and started going in toward the house or wherever the water was to get the water. What does that mean? The brook at Kerith is dried up, but the woman in Zarephath is going to get a cup of water. Dried up brook, but water running in Zarephath. I told you when God dries up your brooks, he's trying to get you out to a river. The river is opening. She goes to get the cup of water. And while she's on her way to get the cup of water, Elijah says, ma'am, would you bring me a little slice of bread? Now that's when she hears the bad news. That's when he hears the bad news. The woman looks at him and says, sir, I'm sorry to tell you, I don't have any bread. Sir, I'm out here in this yard gathering these 2 sticks because I have a handful of flour. King James says meal, but I'm just New King flour. I have a handful of flour in the bottom of the flour barrel and just a little oil at the bottom of the oil cruse, the jar, oil jar, same thing. And sir, I had come out here to gather these sticks in order to cook that last bit of bread. And I had planned, sir, that my son and I would eat this bread and die. Boy, that sounds like a tragedy to me. That sounds like disaster in capital D. But watch Elijah. You see, when you know God, you don't panic under pressure. Elijah looked at the lady and said, ma'am, I hear you. Nothing wrong with my ears. I heard what you said. That you had a handful of flour, a little oil in the cruse. You're going to cook this last bit of bread, and you and your son are going to eat it and die. But ma'am, listen. Here's what I want you to do. Don't change your plans completely. You go on in, cook that last bit of meal, flour. Make that bread. But here's the change in the story. The Lord told me to tell you that when the bread is done, that you should bring me, the prophet of God, the first piece of bread. Because, here's the reason, because the Lord told me to tell you, if you did it all during the famine, you, your household, and I would eat and have a plenty. Later, do you believe him? Ball is in your court. Do you trust him? Ball is in your court. And here's what Elijah was trying to tell that lady. This is my closing point. Here's what Elijah was trying to tell that lady. God said, ma'am, don't focus on your poverty, but rather focus on my promises and provisions. You don't have any bread, handful of meal, flour. You and your son going to eat it and die. That's poverty. Ma'am, don't focus on your poverty, but focus on rather God's promises and provisions. Because God said, if you bring me the first piece, all during the famine, you and your son, your household, and I would eat and have a plenty. Lady, ball's in your court. What are you going to do about it? Well, you heard me say this before, and I'll repeat it. There's a crisis of faith and doubt. Charles, you've been teaching this in Wednesday night Bible class, in that book you all been studying now. I come and study with you sometimes when I'm in town in particular. Doubt and faith, you can have a crisis of doubt and faith. Your faith is not always 100%. Your faith is not always tip-top. Sometimes doubt creeps in and will try to depress your faith. God will say to you, do this. Doubt said, oh, don't do that. Because you see, in a sense, this kind of doubt that I'm talking about comes from the devil. Because the devil never wants us to believe God. He always wants us to disbelieve God. To diss God. Devil loves for us to diss God. Put God down. So lady, what you going to do? Are you going to believe God or are you going to diss God? Crisis of faith and doubt. Old doubt stepped up and said, listen, lady, that old man talking about bring him the first piece of your bread. Who is he? Who in the world will give him the audacity and the brazeness to step up in here talking about give him the first piece of your bread, and he hadn't worked a day in his life for it? That bread belongs to you and your son. Don't trust that old man. But faith says, listen, man. Ma'am, he is a man of God. Ma'am, he's just come up from the brook Kerith. The water's been running, ma'am, and he's been drinking from the brook. Ma'am, the birds have been catering his breakfast and his dinner. Ma'am, he spoke truth to power to King Ahab, and he's a man of God, ma'am. You ought to trust him. Now jumps back in and tells him, no, you discard again, discard again. Because you see, ma'am, this is your bread, and you and your son work for it, so you ought to go on and cook your last bit of flour and make that, as the old folks said, a whole cake of bread, and you and your son eat that bread and die in dignity. Don't let that man take your dignity away. Die, eat it and die in dignity. Faith says, I tell you what, lady, you can discard if you want to and believe that foolishness that doubt is talking about. And when you are dead and they look at your tombstone, all they're going to see is dead and dignified. But lady, if you want to see a miracle, trust the man of God. He speaks for God. Listen to him. So she goes back in the kitchen. Battle is going on for her mind. Finally, faith wins. Faith wins, and she kicks doubt and disbelief in the back of her mind, suppresses doubt and disbelief with her faith, and allows it to rise. She starts getting ingredients together, preparing that bread. As she's preparing that bread, let me just imagine something here, okay? You don't mind me using my imagination. She's like my mother singing, making that bread, getting the dough and rolling it out, the rolling pin, getting it ready. She's singing, I will trust in the Lord. I will trust in the Lord. I will trust in the Lord until I die. Finishes getting it together, puts it in whatever she bakes it in. Bread is done now. Bread's done. She slices off that first piece. Takes that first piece out. Gives it to the prophet. Here, O man of God, is that first piece of bread that you asked me for. Sir, I just want you to know that this slice of bread represents my faith. This slice of bread is a testament to my belief in your God. You told me that if I do this, God would take care of me, my household, and you throughout the whole famine and starvation period. So, sir, I'm doing all that I can do. Here's that first piece of bread. Well, when she gives him that first piece of bread, she gives her testament of faith. She demonstrates her faith in Elijah's God. Then she goes on back in the house. And I wished I could tell you when she got in the kitchen what transpired. I wished I was a scientist, that I could tell you through observation and through empirical data what took place. But I got sense enough to know as a preacher that you can't put miracles under the microscope of scientific analysis. They transcend the analysis of science. So may I just put it in poetical theology. When she got back in the kitchen, her eyes got large, for she went to get the rest of the bread to feed herself and her son. But when she looked over at the barrel of flour, the barrel was full of flour. When she looked over at the oil cruise, it was full of oil. Tell me, Julius, what transpired? God's angel filled the barrel with flour. God's angel filled the cruise with oil. It's no secret what God can do. What he's done for others, he'll do for you. That's why I'm not worried about a Trump era or any other era. Our God knows how to take care of us. He can set up supermarkets in desert places. Our God knows how to take care of his own. That's why I heard the hymnist say the other day, be not dismayed, whatever betide, God will take care of you. Beneath his wings of love abide, God will take care of you through every day, all the way. He will, he will, he will, God will take care of you. Is there anybody here this morning who knows my Jesus? Is there anybody here this morning who knows our God? He knows how to trump the trump. Nobody can block our blessings. God is able to come through back doors, come through windows, come through roofs, however he needs to. He can get in to bless you, and nobody can stop his blessings. I'm glad I know him. Do you know him? 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 He's all right. He's all right. Hey, 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 yes. Our God is a mighty battle axe. He's all right. He's all right. Doors of the church stand open. Invitation to Christian discipleship is extended.